Thank you all for coming to the September corporate scrutiny, and welcome to members of Southern Water. We've got Island Roads as well, representation, haven't we, somewhere? Have we? They were supposed to be here, weren't they? Anyway. Good evening all members. A bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Fire procedures. We're not expecting any fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building and walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts cannot be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it is safe to do so by a member of staff. Thank you. Right, moving on to minutes of the last meeting. Has everybody read the minutes? Happy with the minutes?
Agreed. There's no dissenting voice.
Anybody wish to agree the minutes?
Acceptance.
Okay, thank you very much. And bear with me just while I autograph that. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, members, declaration. Oh, I should say welcome to Cameron Paling, who has joined us as the IWOLP representative. Welcome. Declarations of interest, members. None?
Move on.
Move on. Public questions. Have we got any public questions?
We've had none notified, Chairman.
Okie dokie. And nobody in the public gallery. Okay. Right, we have now these progress and outcomes. There's quite a list there, isn't there? They've, of course, members have got those. I suppose there's little points in me sort of going through it all and reading out. Are there any questions or points that anybody wishes to make regarding those to date?
Chairman, this is an initiative that we commenced some years back, but we put into abeyance because of COVID, and we thought we would resurrect it to make sure that the actions asked for by Scrutiny Committee were followed through. Mm-hmm. So this is a progress report that will appear on your future agenda. Yeah,
thank you, Paul. Well, it's a good thing to have, and it's good to have that catch up. I don't think there's any point in sort of dwelling on it, is there? Okie dokie. So moving on. Hi, John. You're over here. Right, moving on to Southern Water. Roles and responsibility of Southern Water dealing with flooding. I suggest here that probably the best way is, Keith, if you can give us some sort of outline of roles and responsibility of Southern Water regarding flooding, and then members can come in as required and ask questions or whatever they need to do. I do have, there's a couple of apologies I've had. Councillor Ellis is part of the Neighbourhoods and Regeneration Committee. They were invited as well. She was going to come and she has a couple of questions, but unfortunately she's not very well. She's in hospital at the moment, so she won't be here tonight. But I will hold her questions for the end. So if you want to take that on and see where we land from there. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for inviting us along, or I kind of invited ourselves along. So I think we had a fairly difficult summer in terms of high levels of rainfall. So I thought it's important for us to come today to be accessible and accountable and give the opportunity to explain what went on and what we're doing about it. So in some areas of the Isle of Wight, we received a month to 2 months worth of rainfall in a few hours, which was absolutely exceptional. And during that, I think the Isle of Wight Council gave a kind of press release to say what are the roles and responsibilities of each agency in that, which I will just go through today for people who may not be aware. So Southern Water is the statutory undertaker for water and sewage services, and its responsibilities in terms of flooding is the public foul sewer. Generally on the Isle of Wight, the surface water sewers and highway gullers were not adopted and remain the responsibility of the council and island roads. Main water courses, such as rivers, underground rivers, etc., are the responsibility of the Environment Agency. And then landowners generally have riparian ownership for drainage features on that land. So that kind of creates a very muddled picture of who is responsible for what. Just to drill down a little bit further, the matters of Southern Water, the sewer flooding that we experience generally happens for two reasons. Reason number one is what we call sewer flooding other causes. And by other causes, we mean blockages, collapses, root balls. When that causes flooding, happy days, we deal with the problem that caused it and the customers will not experience further problems. The other reason is hydraulic overload. And by that, I mean too much water in the system. Now that is quite a complex problem because you could have a not so hypothetical scenario where you have someone's downpipe goes into a highway gully, into a sewer, into a ditch, and into a watercourse. And in that scenario, you have the homeowner, the council, Southern Water, the landowner, the farmer, and the Environment Agency all involved. And if there's any slight defect on any of those things, you can get flooding. So what I wanted to do is just talk about what I would recommend tactically and what I would recommend strategically. So tactically, what Laura and I have spent the last kind of month or so doing with local councillors and communities is creating flood groups. And we meet on a semi-regular basis with local residents, councillors, where we go through particular hotspots, discuss what the customers see as shortfalls in the service from the agencies, how we develop plans to deal with stuff, how we get mitigation measures together. So we're kind of not building the ark as it's starting to rain. And I found them to be extremely successful and effective. And I think a case in point would be Ride Flood Group around the Monkton Mead area, which frequently suffered from internal flooding from the properties around there. And because of the consistent nature of the flood groups coming together to meet, Southern Water spent £3 million on a pumping station. The Environment Agency spent, I think it came to about £5 million to reroute the outfall onto the beach. And that's purely because every month we would attend, we would work with the customers and we would get the right things done. So that's kind of the tactical approach that we're trying to get for flooding. On a more strategic level, this meeting comes at a really opportune moment for the council and Southern Water. So for the council, its strategy for planning is out for consultation at the moment, which we're working to our response. But on Southern Water's side, we are shortly be consulting on our drainage and wastewater management plan, which is going to set our strategy for drainage for the next 25 years on the island. And I think we have the opportunity to do something quite special on the Isle of Wight in terms of surface water removal. So at this point, I will cut a distinction between a foul sewer and a combined sewer. So a foul sewer takes sewage and sewage alone. A combined sewer takes water from other sources such as gullies, highway drains, etc. Now, they were installed in Victorian times. We still have them today in some of our older towns. And as a result, when it rains, that system gets overwhelmed. If we purely deal with foul systems alone, we could eliminate flooding and pollution from sewers. And I think looking at the investment document that I've sent out to some of you for the next 5 years, a lot of that is just building bigger sites and pumping more water. That's not really the best way to do it. The best way to do it is tackle it at the root cause and deal with the surface water input. So as part of that consultation, I think it's a good opportunity for both organisations to work together to find that money to spend it in the best possible way, which will be removing the surface water influence to the public foul sewer to prevent flooding and pollution. And I understand the brief was flooding and pollution, so at this point I will hand over to my colleague Laura to talk about the pollution aspect that was on the agenda, if that's okay, Chairman. Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I think it's really important for us to discuss pollution now, particularly due to the recent coverage regarding our discharges. And it's really important that we educate and we explain what actually happens when we do discharge. So I think it's important to make a distinction that what's actually released isn't raw sewage, it's stormwater, and that's a mixture of wastewater, which is heavily diluted by rain and runoff from roads and gardens, and it's water from washing machines and dishwashers and showers, and we're actually permitted to do that by the Environment Agency. We discharge via a CSO, which is a combined sewer overflow. It's a release point built into our sewerage system, which allows us to discharge into the watercourse. And basically, in periods of really, really, really wet weather, and obviously, like Keith mentioned, we had, I think it's about a month's worth of rainfall in about 6 hours. That overloads our system, and therefore we have to be able to discharge. And the reason we do it in a watercourse is because the alternative would be to flood people's houses, and they wouldn't be able to use their toilets, and that's just not ideal for anyone. And what's actually passed through is it's initially screened, and then it's separated, so there's absolutely no solids that are released. It is just completely fluid, and it's important for us to make that distinction because we work really hard, and all of our colleagues on the island work really hard to ensure that we uphold really high standards. And there's 14 designated bathing water beaches on the island, 12 of which are excellent, 2 of which are good. And I think it's factual to say that the bathing water quality on the island has never been better. And it's really important to us to share that message so people aren't concerned about going to the beach. And that rating comes from the Environment Agency, and it's tested weekly. And it's important as well, when it's tested, it's not just as a result of us and our discharges, it's also agricultural runoff from roads, litter, dog fowl. So it's a combination of a load of different things, not just us. And when we do discharge, we've obviously got a responsibility to record all of these discharges through our telemetry system, and we have a duty to inform the Environment Agency and then the council, who make the final decision on the bathing water quality. I think I've covered everything, have I?
Yeah, I think just to emphasise the point of the importance of the collaboration between our drainage wastewater management plan and the Isle of Wight Council's island plan, which is out for consultation at the moment. I think there's a really good opportunity for symbiosis in the way that we work together on that, because hydraulic flooding is a shared problem amongst a number of agencies. And I think, moreover, if you were going to build a town from new, you would have a surface water system and a foul system. We've inherited a combined system. And I think that rather than just pump more, a cubic metre of water weighs a tonne. When we just pump that around the island of what is predominantly rainwater, the water industry uses 5% of the national grid, and the water industry consumes 1 to 2% of CO2 in the UK. Now, that is just predominantly pumping water around in circles. That's not a 21st century way of doing things. I think we could have something quite special in the way that we manage water on the Isle of Wight. And that's covered everything. I'm open to questions now, Chairman. Please.
Lovely, thank you for that, and thank you for the document that you sent through. Unfortunately, it came through this morning, which I think for most members it didn't give us enough time to, because it's quite a lengthy document and interesting, very useful, thank you. But we obviously haven't got enough time to get deeply into it yet, but that gives us a good overview. Members, questions? I'm sure. Yes, Chris, come
on. 2 questions. One, in your document that you circulated this morning that I have managed to read, you talk about the statistics around flooding. There's no statistics in there about the storm outflows, the excess ones. I was thinking that was fairly low and was quite shocked when I saw the figures in the press about that. I think they should be there, and I think we should be circulated with that information to know what we're actually talking about and whether what was in the press was actually true. So that was one. The second is 2 or 3 years back, we put an immense underground chamber between Shanklin and Sandown that was meant to sort of alleviate the need very much for this sort of excess water going into the station, and that being requiring pumping out to sea. The figures since then still seem pretty bad to me. Why is it not working? Or is it not working? If these are 20-year events and they're happening every year, I think we've got our planning of the standard of what a 20-year event is wrong, because it seems to be that a 20-year event is an annual event. And the other thing is, when we were doing the work in the bay, putting in that enormous chamber, they were looking at the Cornish Cottage, the pumping station down on the seafront in Shanklin, and looking at the possibility of putting a Scandinavian type device in there that effectively sterilised everything that was going out. And that never happened. I think probably stumbling between you and the Environment Agency, but why didn't it happen? And could it happen? Because I think people would be a lot happier if you're putting serious outflows in, knowing that it's harmless and sterile.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. So we have a statutory obligation to notify the Environment Agency of every single discharge, and that is a matter of public record. So all of our sites with the capability to discharge have to have a licence in order to do that. It's quite a complicated legal document, which I won't go into here, but we cannot carte blanche discharge whenever we want. We have to. And if we work outside of those permits, it's a criminal offence. So part of that permit is to inform the Environment Agency of discharge. So it's a matter of public record. The storm storage tank at Hope Beach is a good example of why we should go down the route of catchment management versus just dealing with the problem of pumping more or retaining more. So the budget for that scheme was £3 million. And the objective was to reduce stormwater discharges from an average summer from 5 discharges to 3. So very quickly we get towards willingness to pay. Do customers want to pay more for their water bills to have, you know, a kind of very low levels of improvement in the discharges? That's a case study of that. And Shanklin, the bathing water is classified as excellent, which is the highest possible standard from the samples that get taken by the Environment Agency every week. So there's an example right there. So £3 million got spent on that storm storage tank, and about £30,000 got used for kind of catchment sensitive farming and collaboration with the Isle of Wight Council to improve signage and dog poo bins, etc. To me, that softer stuff is more effective than the just tipping concrete and having big capital schemes. So that's, I think, where we need to be in terms of surface water removal. The third one was the possibility of dosing performic acid into the outfall to sterilise it. And again, I think that kind of creates a bit of public alarm with dosing to see that whether that's safe. I know it's been successful in Scandinavia. We would only do things like that if it said it in the permit issued by the Environment Agency. And if you want an example of something like that, you look at Chichester, where some of the outfalls have to have UV to effectively neutralise any of the nasty bugs that could potentially get pumped out. So we will meet the requirements of the permit. If the Environment Agency changed the permit, said you want UV on there or you have to have performic acid, we would be obliged to do that by law. There's no requirement to do that. It's one of the options that were considered, but it was discarded.
Yeah,
Just one comment. When Southern Water presented to us about what they were going to do, the budget was £6 million, not £3 million. Do you know what happened to the other £3 million?
The storm storage tank was 3 million. I haven't got the figures for what was spent elsewhere, but a lot of money was given to the council to do some stuff. We subsidised farmers to manage their land in certain ways to help the outfalls. We removed misconnections, and the overall objective of the scheme was to make sure that Shanklin was of excellent bathing water quality, and I'm pleased to report it is. So it cannot get better than that with the new stringent EU standards.
It can get slightly better, but it has improved, you're right. And it is good. But there's still the occasional, we did have one negative result, didn't we, last year?
We do, but I would like to underline the point, as Laura said, that there are other sources of pollution other than the water industry, such as road runoff, such as farming, such as animals on the beach, etc. And to give you some sort of confidence that it's treated seriously, when we do have a kind of aberration in terms of the sampling, it gets sent off for speciation. And by speciation, I mean to find out what is the origin of the organism that produced it, whether it be bovine, avian, human, etc. If it's human, it's generally the water board. If it's elsewhere, then we need to extend our investigation to understand what is the source of the water quality problems.
Okay, thank you for that. Interesting. Councillor Quigley.
Thanks for coming along, Laura and Keith. Unfortunately, it's your third time you've had questions from me, Keith, so I'll be brief. I noticed the target on your literature for reduction in leakage around the Southern Water areas. You want to reduce it to 84.9 million litres a day lost. What's the target on the island, and what's the loss on the island? So I couldn't find that. And then the second question is around, you saying if you had an ideal world, you would, if you built a new town, you'd build it a different way. The island plan is out for consultation. I'm assuming you've got quite a few comments to make on that. So what would you want to see different on that?
So I'll deal with the second question first. So we were approached for a similar consultation in 2019 for the plan. So I can't speculate on what we're going to put forward. I've been involved to some extent. I'll let that come out when it comes out. I'll go through what our response was to the 2019 plan. We gave 23 areas of concern where we were particularly worried about the hydraulics of the sewer in the area. We requested engagement for individual planning applications. And we requested the Isle of Wight Council to kind of do it in a sort of phased approach, so that we could make any increases to capacity into the sewer prior to it causing problems for customers. So those were the three kind of bullet take-home points to our response in 2019. But at the moment, we're still going through all the capacity checks that we can present to the consultation. And the other question, sorry, you have to remember, leakage. Yeah. So I mean, the current leakage target for the Isle of Wight is 3 million litres per day, just for the Isle of Wight. But similarly to my discussions about wastewater, it's easier to treat it at source. So rather than set ourselves targets for leakage, we've set ourselves a target for consumption. And we're trying to kind of encourage all of our customers through like a social contract to use 100 litres per person per day. And we offer free water saving visits to all customers on the Isle of Wight, where someone will visit their property for free and give them tips and advice and even freebies such as water boats on how to reduce their water consumption, because it's cheaper to get people to use less than go out and fix leaks and dig holes and pump more water and tip concrete. So it's the softer stuff that's found always to be more effective.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Medland and then Councillor Palin.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for being a bit late. Thank you, Mr. Herbert, very much. I really appreciate the fact you've come and you're engaging with us. It's really fantastic because it was, it's been a tricky time in the last few months. And I just want to sort of put this in a couple of ways, just a couple of points really, is that, I see some really major problems. We've had, as Councillor Quirks mentioned, this frequency now is becoming, with climate change, we're looking at this becoming a much more recurrent event, and it's becoming extremely worrying compared with the fact people are getting flooding of sewage in their houses, for example. We can't really think of anything worse than that, can we? We also have a problem of ageing and failing infrastructure, which is constantly causing roads to be closed quite dramatically, putting up four-way traffic lights and causing all kinds of congestion. This happens quite frequently now. So we've got two problems. We've got an overloaded old infrastructure, which is really stretched. Plus we've got changing climate. Plus we've got continuously increasing numbers of people using water. And there seems to be the amount of water that people use seems to grow over time as well, doesn't it? So your approach is to ask us not to use so much water, which we've been trying on the island for a long time, because we had quite high water charges. So we're accustomed to economising on the island with water. But it doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense. But as you say, there's an excellent opportunity here, because we've got the island plan in play. I mean, I would like to hear your recommendations on bringing in building guidance on, say, grey water usage, because it seems to be a complete ridiculous waste that we're not saving rainwater or reusing water when systems exist and they can be engineered into new housing or retrofitted into housing. And even I think we should start thinking about sewage mitigation schemes, you know, like some alternative sewage mitigation schemes, because I do fear that our sewage system, which is pretty tenuous, you know, it goes all the way from the West Wight all the way to Sandown, it's getting added to all the time, and we've seen some extraordinary releases into the sea this year, all protected maritime environments around us. You know, do we need to start thinking about other ways? You know, are there other ways that households themselves can start to work on this? Because it seems we are facing a major strategic problem here with water and sewage, both actually. And I'm just hoping that maybe from this discussion we can get some good ideas that go into the recommendations for future developers of what kind of design they should put into their housing, rather than the current models, which seem to bear no relation to any of these things we're discussing this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, it probably goes without saying that our request to planning applications will be to consider properties as extremely water efficient, both in terms of potable water and in terms of wastewater. So, I mean, the wastewater seems the crux of what we're talking about today. So, you know, in terms of the way that we scrutinise planning applications, we will give a rudimentary capacity check to say whether or not we think that's a good idea. I mean, generally, the foul element accounts for less than 10% during heavy rainfall. So when one of our stations discharges, less than 10% is actually from homes and properties. So if you know, my recommendation to people considering planning applications is the complete separation between the surface water and the foul. Have we considered things like balancing ponds? Have we considered things like swales? Is there adequate separation? Because if you've got a reasonably sized car park, like the size of the one we've got outside at County Hall, it'll be served by a series of gullies, because of the hard standing area, the water won't penetrate through or run off into a gully. That gully will go into the public foul sewer, which will overwhelm it during a heavy storm. That's not the way we should be thinking about things. We should be thinking about what else we can do to manage the water that we've got. We could even use it as a potential resource, like you say. So, and a good example of this is the Asda development, where they do have collection for their grey water, because we're flushing the toilet with A-grade drinking water, which it seems perverse to me. We could be using it and looking at it in a different way. I mean, the housing stock that we've got is where we need to be focusing on, and for new housing stock, that's where we need to be scrutinising for the new ones that are being built to make sure that they're the most water efficient that they can be. Does that answer your question? I mean, in terms of the road closures and the delays, I mean, water companies have quite a difficult job in terms of the slider bar that is on one aspect of it. Let's just fix stuff when it goes wrong, and then on the other aspect of it, well, bills need to go up, and we'll put right what is wrong. So to kind of put that in some sort of case study, when we have a burst water main, we cut out the offending section. That goes off to a laboratory where we look at the metallurgics of it to find out what's the age, what's the condition, is it going to happen again? Whether do we need to intervene, or can we just take the risk of it happening again? This is so low that it's actually in quite good condition. So we cut a very fine balance between fixing stuff when it goes wrong and then intervening and replacing it. Because on one hand, bills would be very high and we would cause so much disruption. But on the other hand of it, there would be issues to impact of service, which is what you say. So there's, we have a whole department of asset management doing that for us, making sure that we make the right decisions and the right interventions. But all of this is subject to consultation for our next 25 years, which I would continue as encourage as an individual and an organisation to respond to with your wishes for that.
And I understood that you don't have any control over prices. That's set by DEFRA, is it?
No, Ofwat. So it's a 5-year funding cycle. So we go every 5 years to Ofwat to saying these are all the things that we want to do. This is how much we think it's going to cost. And then Ofwat makes the decision on how much we can ultimately charge our customers and effectively sets the business plan for the next 5 years. So Ofwat set the bill. So this current period, we've got locked in for the Isle of Wight just over £50 million of investment. And that's not reactive, that is proactive. And the context of which I've circulated to a few members of the committee, I can circulate it to the chair and you can pass that on if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Just one question before I come to Cameron. You mentioned about when you got an emergency, that's understandable. You have to go and hit the road, dig it up, and do whatever you have to do. But do you liaise with other utility companies when you have routine maintenance jobs to do, so that you all know when each other are doing a job and you can dig the road at the same time, type of thing?
That would be the dream, Steve, wouldn't it? I
Absolutely,
think
yeah.
we again, and if it's an emergency, we're allowed to kind of close the road and undertake what needs to be done. If it's a planned work, we've got to apply for a notice through Island Roads, who manage the highway network, and who have to consider things like diversions, emergency access, bus routes, etc. So we put that application in. You know, if Island Roads have got multiple applications in, it would be for them to do. We don't really have visibility of other organisations' planned work. We rely on Island Roads to do that for us.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Cameron.
Thank you. So what process do you have to go through when the planning department obviously would contact yourselves when a proposed development's coming forwards? So obviously, if we're building on larger, greenfield sites, that's going to increase the water runoff from those sites rather than being soaked away in as fields, let's say, increasing the pressure on the system. So what obviously process would you go through when making your comments, and also how closely would you liaise with other agencies such as the Environment Agency, Island Roads, and the local flooding authority?
So the processes that we would go through for a capacity check would really depend on the size of the development. So for quite a large development, we would put loggers in our sewer to monitor the levels in the sewer. We would look at historic flooding records. We would look at customer complaints. We would look at the treatment work compliance. I mean, the Environment Agency owns the flood map, which is in effect the document whereby it kind of highlights areas of risk, and we would work with them to make sure that. But I think the overall decision on planning is through the Isle of Wight Council. We are not a statutory consultee. Our job is to advise the Isle of Wight Council whether or not there's capacity issues in the public foul sewer or the potable water supply, which we would do that. I mean, in terms of the potable water supply, we would look at things like flows, pressures, age of assets, and whether or not the proposed development would have an adverse effect on other customers in that water supply area.
Thank you. Any other members? Any other comments or questions at the moment? Councillor Spinker, I'm sure you've got something to say.
Thank you, Councillor Hastings. I've tried to look at the documents that you very kindly supplied as best I could it's not a criticism, but in the somewhat limited time. And it does appear to me, looking at some of these graphs or tables, where they're in the sort of browny red colour, which is of very significant concern, that Sandown water treatment plant has a number of very significant concerns, including risk of sewer collapse, risk of sewer flooding, storm overflow performance, risk of, no, not that one, risk of not being able to comply in dry weather, strangely, as well, and also very serious concern about nutrient neutrality. And that's Sandown, which I think is generally considered to be our flagship. Now, there's also significant concern, and these are your documents, over a large number of the other water treatment plants on the Isle of Wight, including, for example, Shell Fleet and things of that nature. Now, that's a concern based, as I understand it, on the current usage and then projected forward the current usage on the Isle of Wight. Now, when you project forward, how many additional houses do you allow for?
I think it's important to say that we don't allow for the housing.
Okay, so that's the prediction then of concern continuing from the 2020 to 2050 period is based on what's going on, as it were, current situation.
Yeah, so of the 50 million pounds we've got committed to the Isle of Wight for the 2020 to 2025, Sandown Wastewater Treatment Works has attracted 9 million pounds of that to address some of those concerns as a proactive intervention. I kind of reiterate my point that a lot of those ills that you read out would be solved by removing surface water connections from the public foul sewer. If surface water connections were not plumbed into the public foul sewer, we wouldn't flood as much and we wouldn't discharge. I think it would be fair to say that we could eliminate almost all discharges by removing that surface water connection.
And when would you be in a position to put the infrastructure in that would eliminate surface water discharge?
That would have to be in collaboration with a number of agencies, most pertinently the Isle of Wight Council, which I think is really important that both agencies work together to deal with this.
Assuming that the agencies do work together, when would you be in that position?
We've set ourselves a target of 40 years to eliminate
40 years.
pollutions.
40 years.
40 years.
Now, if housing numbers go up to, say, 650 a year, or even possibly with the new planning algorithm, over 1,000 houses a year, it's going to be even worse. It's going to take you even longer.
Not necessarily. I don't think it's the new housing stock that's the problem. My expectation would be for a new development to be very water efficient in terms of water and wastewater. It's the existing stock that we need to worry about. For instance, if I challenged you and said, where does your downpipe go? What would be your answer? A lot of downpipes in historic towns go straight into the public foul sewer. So that's all of that roof space, all of that water is going straight into the foul sewer and overwhelming it. All of the people who've had their drives block paved, that's running straight into the road, down the gully and into the public foul sewer. A new development, I'd do everything in my power to stop that happening for a new development. And I think most developers are responsible and take on board our advice. So, you know, in terms of the planning strategy, you know, if we cast a cynical eye over that and say we need these houses to be efficient, I don't think that's going to take much capacity of the system. It's the existing stock that's the problem.
But the pollutants, as it were, that's only going to be marginally affected, isn't it, by stopping stormwater, by stopping overflow from individual sites?
Well, if we can eliminate discharges, if it was a foul-only system, well, combined sewer overflows wouldn't exist, would they? Because they wouldn't be taking any surface water influence.
But that's not going to happen for a very long time, is it?
No, but you know, we've planned our investment over the next 5 years to address the specific areas of concern that you ruled out, and we've got our strategy document over the next 25 years to recognise that, you know, this is a hot topic, people care about it, and people are talking about it, which is great. We need to make sure that we work together to deliver those desires of those customers who have taken the time to respond to that.
The current draft plan provides that all new developments that link to Sandown, to the Sandown treatment plant, will be considered to be nitrate neutral as far as the solent is concerned. Is that actually correct, that it would be nitrate neutral? Sandown's shown in your charts, isn't it, of putting nitrates into into the water around Sandown. And every tidal flow chart that I've ever looked at shows the water coming back round into the island. That's why we have two high waters. So how does it work out that everything going to Sandown is nitrate neutral for the specifically protected sites in the solent?
Again, we'd revert to our regulators on this. So you will see in the investment that we've got, a number of sites have nutrient permits. So Wroxall, Shalfleet, Calbourne Sewage Works, this year we'll all have phosphorus permits. And because it's in the permit, we have a statutory duty now to meet those level of phosphates coming out of there.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
you know, we design, build, operate and maintain our plant in accordance with the permit. When we fall outside of those permits, we're breaking the law. So we throw everything at it, and the team working for me spend every waking hour trying to meet the minimum requirements of those permits. If we fall outside of that, we're in trouble. So, you know, in terms of the nutrients, Sandown doesn't currently have a nutrients permit.
And what does so it's currently discharging nutrients, but because it doesn't have a permit, it's not unlawful. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. And, you know, I would just pick you up. We're talking like the water companies are the only source of nutrients. I would say that highway runoff, farm runoff is a very strong source of nutrients as well, perhaps even more so.
Sure, that's right. But we're trying to eliminate, for climate change and various other reasons, nutrient pollution. So really, I want to try and drill down a little, if I may, into this. Really, the presumption that Sandown is nitrate neutral isn't actually a sound presumption, is it? What you're saying is it doesn't matter from Southern Water's point of view because it's not unlawful.
That's exactly what I'm not saying. That was what you said.
I thought that's what you were saying, sorry, because
No,
it doesn't have a permit.
We meet the conditions of the permit. So currently,
And if it doesn't have a permit,
then, you know, my expectation would be if the regulator saw it as a problem, they would engage with us to try and change the permit.
right,
So, you know, if I take the example of Roxall, Shalfleet, Calbourne, the regulator has obviously seen phosphorus as a problem, hence has put a permit on the works, which have caused us to up our game and invest in the works to meet the permit. The regulator is one of the key stakeholders in where we spend our money and where it goes. And the Environment Agency, the statutory agency with the responsibility for land, air and water, you know, we trust those guys as the experts.
Okay. I should go back and read your documents more carefully now when I've got more time, because I'm not fully understanding, because I don't understand how, if your document identifies that Sandown, for example, is a very significant risk of nitrate pollution, how you can say that it's not a problem. I just don't understand the logic there, but perhaps it's because I haven't read your documents enough, or perhaps it's not. I'll have to have a look.
I'm welcome to have a meeting outside of you in this, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I knew you'd have a question or two. Councillor Spink is our chairman of Task and Finish Group on the Island Plan, so there's quite a lot of interest going on. What I suggest is that once you've read the document more fully and again and gone right through it, maybe send a question to Keith and have that answered and circulated from there. Thank you. Anybody else? No more takers. Right, I'm going to just refer to the email, two emails actually that I had this morning. This one's from Councillor Ellis, who gave apologies and say is unwell, so unable to be here. But she says, earlier this year, the EA ran an open national consultation on managing water in areas of severe stress. There were only 54 responses in total, and no part of Southern Water area is included in this updated list, despite Southern Water's own website making it very clear that the Isle of Wight is absolute priority for needing new sources of water. See link below. Well, you know about that already, so don't need to send you the link. It seems like a missed opportunity to have this recognised at a strategic national level. Please, can Southern Water clarify what engagement they had with the consultation and why the Isle of Wight has not been recognised as a severely stressed area?
Well, it has. And I mean, the council is absolutely right. I mean, we live in a water stressed area that you wouldn't believe it receives less rainfall than southern Spain. And what we've inherited is kind of an old water board system where Ventnor had its own water board, Shanklin had its own water board, Cowes had its own water board. And Sea Clean Wight, which was the wastewater aspect of it, happened about 20 years ago now, where everything was pumped to Sandown. We're working towards the same kind of rationalisation for water supply on the Isle of Wight. And there's two aspects of this. There's what we call Network 2030. So in 2030, we want a full rationalisation of the water supply zone. Because if you lived in London and you worked for Thames Water, you'd have one works, one reservoir, and that would serve a few million people. Here, we've got 20 works, 30 reservoirs, serving about 150,000 people. So it's too elaborate and it's not resilient enough for where we need it. So there's the first aspect, to effectively just rationalise it, make it a lot more simple. Then there's the water resources aspect of it, which what the councillor is getting at. Now, we've got a programme called Water for Life, which is, we've got a chalk stream on the Isle of Wight, Luckley Brook, and believe it or not, in the world, there's only about 120 chalk streams. They're a very, very precious resource, as is the River Test, where we get a third of our water from Sandown, where it's treated at Testwood. Now, the Environment Agency has changed the abstraction licences on Carisbrook, Buckham on the island, and also Testwood, which is causing us to look at our 25-year plan for water supply. And we're calling that Water for Life. Now, there's a number of options being looked at, which have recently been out for consultation in terms of desalinisation, Havant Thicket Reservoir, and potential for reuse or part reuse. We haven't got a solution for that yet. We're still looking at all the options. I don't think desalinisation is up there, or I don't think there's public appetite for reuse. We're nowhere near any agreement to regards what we want to do, but we're still in the elementary stages as part of our 25-year plan for those things. So yes, it's recognised we are a very water-stressed area. In conjunction with all our other initiatives to reduce leakage and reduce consumption, we are looking at the licences that we currently hold to see whether they're still relevant and still in a place where they don't impact the environment, the chalk streams, and are sustainable.
Thank you. And might be interesting, the Visit Isle of Wight might be in touch to get a quote from you at the Isle of Wight having less rainfall than southern Spain. That could be good for marketing.
Yeah, I don't think that's relevant for the past month or so.
Oh, and to answer your other question, by the way, about the downpipes, I have 4 sets of downpipes on our building, and they all go into water butts, and we use that water via a watering can for the garden.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, but the second question from Councillor Ellis. Now, this is about the UCOG application and tying in with water resource. Given that the Isle of Wight is in a precarious situation with regard to freshwater supplies, I'll just cut through the rest of that and ask the question. The risks of water sources are presented by UCOG as being small. Sorry. Oh yeah, the risks to the water source by UCOG are saying they're small, but the consequences of contaminating our water source would be huge. How would Southern Water propose to make up for the loss of supply capacity if there was contamination of UCOG's activities?
So I apologies for swerving it. I would default to my colleagues at the Environment Agency, who would effectively manage the groundwater on our behalf. And should they see any risk with what's going on, my expectation would be they would respond. So officially, Southern Water does not have a position on that. The Environment Agency are the statutory organisation with responsibility for land, air and water, and they would comment on that.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm now just going to switch emails to, and I'm not sure if this one is relevant to yourself. This one comes from Sheila Weedle, who also gave apologies. And she says, following the extreme rain, the island experienced parts of Bembridge were flooded and homes were underwater. These parts had not experienced flooding before, and many residents were affected. The Parish Council emailed the councillor responsible for this area with some questions, letter attached. This email was not acknowledged or replied to. Please, can an explanation be given? The residents deserve answers. I was more a question, I think, of her not getting a response, but she's really just talking about the flooding in Bembridge, which I think we've sort of covered, haven't we? Unless you want to expand on that.
Yeah, but by the sounds of it, the response was not from Southern Water. But again, for instances like this, for a strategic meeting of this nature, I would just reiterate Laura's and my commitment to come along and deal with the flood group, meet the residents, find out what the problems were. That sometimes these guys are our eyes and ears and can point us in the direction of where we need to focus our efforts on that. So Brading, Seaview, Benbridge, God's Hill, wherever, we're here to support. That's our job. We just want to help people. Sewer flooding, as one of your colleagues said, is one of the worst things that could possibly happen. We'll do everything we can to stop it happening. I would caveat that with it's a shared problem, and we need support from our colleagues from the council, Island Roads, and the Environment Agency.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Actually, you might get an invite from me to Bryston soon. We're meeting Island Roads. We would have met already, but the pandemic got in the way, and there's a flooding issue there on the main road that you may know about. There's a Blanchard site as well, which doesn't help. But it would be nice to have your presence and sort of get, is it Island Roads? Is it the development site, or is it a Southern Water issue? It would be just nice to, see that on the ground. Thank you for that. Right, I haven't got any other matters, and I think, Councillor Downer.
You spoke about water stress just now, Keith. Now, a scenario for you. With the absolutely increased populations, what would happen if we had another summer like 1976? Ooh. Thank you. Because it was bone dry for weeks.
And the test that we used in recent memory is 2018, when it was boiling hot from about May all the way through to August. Now, we operate everything in our water supply network with sufficient headroom. So I don't think in recent memory we've actually applied for temporary usage restrictions, so things such as hose pipe bans or anything else. So, at the moment, the Isle of Wight's in a really good place with its levels of water resources. So, I mean, just to give you a quick overview, a third of our water comes from Sandown Water Supply Works, which subtracts from the Yar. A third comes from the mainland, and then the other third comes from indigenous sources, from groundwater sources, which generally aren't really affected by prolonged droughts because there's sufficient storage underneath. So, I mean, we're prepared for a drought.
Sorry about the 1976. You wasn't around then.
I wasn't. Sorry.
I was actually holidaying in Shanklin in 1976, and I can actually confirm it was a fabulous summer, and I didn't give a monkey's about where the water was coming from. It was bottled if I needed it. Thank you, Rodney. Just, well, I think we've sort of concluded. I don't know unless anybody's got any other matters or questions. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Laura. Go on, yeah.
Before we go outside of this meeting, could you name some officers that I can liaise with to talk through the plan to remove surface water connections? So if we take anything else away from today, I'd like to emphasise the point that the removal of surface water connections is imperative to stop flooding and pollution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the next thing I was going to say actually, is that that the close relationship between officers, cabinet members in particular, and Southern Water needs to really be emphasised and work hard together to get something sorted here. And yeah, Chief Executive, Liaise.
Sure, if I may.
Yes, please. That would be very useful. Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, 1 out of 2 has to work. It was a lengthy meeting. I think it was very successful. It was a new start, is the best way to present it with Southern Water. We tried not to focus on the history or the difficulties in the past or the lack of engagement. And I think that gave it a very positive beginning to the meeting. Councillor Quigley was there as well, as was Councillor Bacon, and of course Keith, and our MP. And Councillor Andre, who's there? I didn't see you there. You'll be on the end. Too many people in the way. There were really 6 outcomes from it. The first was an agreement between us that Southern Water would cooperate with us on our island-wide capacity review for infrastructure, a very important one. We've touched on some of the issues associated with that today. The second was that they would afford us access to their screen, which provides real-time telemetry, and they have a real-time monitoring system that looks at all of these individual components of their infrastructure on the island, so that firstly we could put that into the modelling that we do here, but also that we would be aware of where there were discharges likely to occur or indeed occurring, and we could inform the local parishes in terms of beach discharges, etc. Quite an important element. We wanted to make sure that we had that telemetry real time, not delayed through a third party like the Environment Agency, so that we could respond very quickly to it. And secondly, that we could disseminate that information not only to the parishes, but through the other mechanisms we already have with our beach officer to the public. The third element was their input into the island plan, clearly a very strategic element for us. There were some key elements to that. The first was that we wanted to ensure that they engaged with the island plan in a very demonstrative way, and that everything that went into it was guided by a principle of ensuring that there was capacity within their network before demand was added to it. And I think that capacity preceding demand is likely to be a phrase that will become fairly commonplace in some of the communications. We also wanted to talk about the infrastructure investment that was required. Again, we've touched on elements of that today. We've all seen circulated the current plan, which, although significant, which I'll acknowledge, clearly we don't want to be left in a position where fixing it is a 40-year plus exercise. That, I would suggest, is not a good outcome from it. And so we were very pleased to hear from their CEO that their new investor has committed to very substantial new investment into their business. And we want to make sure, and this was reiterated by our MP as well, that a good proportion of that new investment is directed at the island. We talked about the planning issues at some length, not only the components of that which are in the island plan, but the need to make sure that within all future developments that occur on the island, we have this complete diversification of sewage from the grey water. Those are the expressions we used. I know the Southern Water people use different terminology for that, surface water, etc. But clearly, we do need to separate grey water going forward, simply so, and I think this is to Peter's remark earlier, that we don't make the existing problem any worse. We stop digging that particular hole. Now, that makes very sound environmental sense. It seems to be a complete no-brainer. Not digging the hole any deeper, and then at the same time going back and fixing the old existing infrastructure is really a two-pronged approach. And then thirdly, sixthly on the list, we also touched on legislation. Again, this is something where we're looking for support from our MP on. There were some conversations about the current conversations going on in Westminster at a national level, and we need to make sure that we are deeply embedded in those discussions so that we can feed the island's very unique status into those dialogues. So 6, I think, very substantial outcomes from it, very positive. We're now scheduling our next round of engagement and discussions, and we look forward to a very solid relationship with Southern Water going forwards, and a great deal of support for them to our island plan.
That's excellent. Thank you. Whole new relationship. Keith, yeah, go on.
Sorry, Steve, just before we're dismissed, I would just like to underline another point of that meeting, in the sense that I consider myself an ambassador for the Isle of Wight, as I'm sure everyone here does. And you don't have to look very far to look at sensationalist stories about water quality and discharges, etc. And I've spent quite a lot of this summer convincing sea swimmers, surfers, other beach user groups that the bathing water beaches on the Isle of Wight are the best they have ever been. The sample data that the Environment Agency take every week underlines that. And also, the discharges that we do have are done in such a way to consider the amenity and environmental sensitivity of the receiving watercourse, the dilution factor, the treatment that actually happens along with that. So I appreciate some people log onto the Beach Boy and they see a sea of red and think that's terrible. Where we need to get to is real-time water quality monitoring data so people can make informed decisions on whether they go in the water or not. But I don't want us to get to the point where we're kind of taking chunks out of Isle of Wight tourism just because we're not getting the facts right. And I think as ambassadors and someone who comes for a company with struggling credibility, we need everyone's help in kind of making that message clear that the bathing water beaches on the Isle of Wight are fantastic. And, all the water sports that we enjoy here, we certainly don't want to disrupt that just because Southern Water has entered a new phase of transparency.
That's a very good point, and thank you for that. And that's another quote, I think, for Visit Isle of Wight. Thanks, Keith. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Laura. Much appreciated. I was going to say, you're welcome to stay as long as you like, but I'm sure you have much more pressing things to do than to listen to the rest of our meeting. Thank you. Just moving on. I note in the back there we have Councillor Jordan. Hello. Can I just ask for a response just to this email that I've just read out from Councillor Wight, where she was unable to be here? Are you aware of this letter that she sent, and are you in process? I assume you're in a process of responding, but just so that we can note it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. In fact, it's up on my screen now. I did ask Silent Road for a reply. It hasn't, presumably hasn't been given, so I'll chase up that reply. It was asked to beginning of August, end of July.
Yeah, that's right. It's dated end of July. Okay, lovely. Thank you for that, and we'll make a note of that. Moving on, we have. Oh, well, we're on to items to be considered by the Cabinet now, members.
If you want to, that list go on the actual Cabinet agenda, Chairman, because it's slightly different.
Oh, is it different on the? Well, I've got the whole agenda right here,
Chairman.
So.
Chief Executive Chairman wants to.
Chairman,
yes.
If I may, just as a point of clarity, I think between the agenda being published and the Cabinet agenda being published, what's been published on this agenda is what was on the forward plan. So items C, G and H are not being considered by the Cabinet in October. So in September, apologies, yes.
In September,
in September, right. Yeah. They'll be moved to October, and we've issued a revised forward plan today.
Right,
so
yeah, CG and
just
H.
the focus of the questions and make best use of the committee's time. Thank you.
Okay. C, G and H. So we can go by the actual agenda, I suppose, as the matters that are on the agenda. Well, the first one listed is the quarterly performance monitoring report. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding that?
Sorry, Chair,
I'm looking at the agenda itself. We can go by either list, whichever way around.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions on the performance report, if I could ask them, please.
I thought you might have. Carry on.
Thank you very much. If you could just bear with me, I'll run through them as quickly as I can. Page 23 of the Cabinet agenda, which is the covering report for the quarterly performance management report. At paragraph 11, refers to the annual accounts and the overall savings being £4.2 million on the last financial year. Within that, it refers to, of this 4.2 million, 1 million being transferred to the so-called transformation reserve, but also 3.2 million to the revenue reserve for capital. I'm quite interested in this. Obviously, this is a budget dealt with by the previous administration, but I wonder, the Cabinet members left us interestingly, but I wonder if the leader or another Cabinet member can tell us if it is still the intention to transfer this level of money to the revenue reserve for capital, given the level of slippage within the capital budget last year, £12 million, a third of the entire capital budget, and this year the projection of 23 million slippage? Does it not make sense to be using revenue to address revenue issues rather than capital issues in this year's budget? And I am disappointed that Councillor Jarman is left when we're about to come onto the performance part of this. And I hope that will, my dissatisfaction that will be expressed to him by the leader. Thank you, Chair. Would you,
Councillor Jarman and Councillor Fuller did have to, they did say before the meeting to me that they had to go at a given point to another meeting, unfortunately.
Well,
the other meeting is a presentation on the Island Plan strategy, which is booked by Freshwater Parish Council, just for information.
Well, personally, Chair, as a former Chair of Scrutiny, I would have always expected Cabinet members to be at corporate scrutiny, not disappearing elsewhere, and I find it extremely disappointing.
Thank you. Are you going?
Chair, I would hope that we're not going to slip into the old habit of the previous administration of always passing questions to senior officers. Can Cabinet members not actually answer questions in this administration?
Of course we can. Sorry, I don't mind who wants to answer. I'm here and ready. I'm going to say to Councillor Brodie that Councillor Brodie is fully aware of the way that we work through our budget processes, and we'll be looking at all elements of spend, both revenue and capital. I would foresee the opportunity to bolster the priorities of the Alliance administration, and therefore there might well be, and quite honestly, as you quite rightly point out, Councillor Brodie, there should be an element of reshaping our revenue spend and possibly balance it to the areas of necessity. And always remember that the last administration didn't face some of the things that we're facing now. We've got a moving, I don't like to call it a feast, but we've got moving concerns. So what was prevalent when the budget was set is now slightly shifted, and we will adhere to our commitments to try and move the Isle of Wight and its residents to a better place. So rest assured, Councillor Brodie, that we're looking at things in a measured way, as you might well imagine, and we will come up with positive ways forward where we will possibly be shifting finance around a bit. But you will all be informed on that, as will indeed the residents and the businesses of the Isle of Wight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Stevens, for that. I mean, it's reasonably reassuring, and I think you know my views on revenue to capital as I proposed to the budget this year back in February. Moving on, Chair, page 41 refers to number of households in temporary accommodation at month end. And although there's a level of slight improvement there are still 185 households on the figures we have here at the end of June that have the misfortune to be living in temporary accommodation. I think that's appalling in a civilised society, to be frank. But with what seems to be some public indifference to affordable rented housing, can I ask whomever is responsible, I think it's you again, Councillor Stevens, how do you propose to address the issues of affordable rented housing? I don't want to hear about affordable housing to buy. I want to hear about affordable rented housing, because that's what islanders need. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brodie, you're sounding more like me every day. I want to see rented accommodation on this Isle of Wight. I want to see rented affordable residence on the Isle of Wight that people can afford. Now, to those ends, we're working behind the scenes, Councillor Brodie. You can't come out with everything beforehand. I'm happy to have informal talks with any councillor about where we're going and what we're doing. But you know as well as I do that if we started to build housing on the Isle of Wight, it's not going to be a quick enough job. We're still going to have mounting homeless people. We've got to address and come forward with policies that support, if you like, and I'm going to put my head on the chopping block, ready-made accommodation that we need to make sure that our residents on Isle of Wight incomes and allowances and benefits can afford. And so we will be coming forward with policies that will support that. I'll leave it at that for the moment, Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I thought you were actually going to say oven ready there for a minute, but you came close.
I mean, not a question, Councillor Stevens, but I would urge you to be having conversations with the major registered housing providers on the Isle of Wight regarding, in my view, the limited number of new starts they've started. Frankly, since the Pan Meadows development in my ward, which delivered 255 affordable units since then, I don't think you've got anywhere near that in the last 5 or 6 years since that was achieved. But I mean, you don't need to answer, Ian, but I think pressure needs to be put on Sovereign and Southern Housing Group, which are both regional housing groups now. They're not local, they're not interested in the Isle of Wight. Real pressure needs to be put on them. They sit on major reserves. Why don't they start investing in what housing associations were established to do, which was to build housing for people who need it?
Part of the dialogue that we are having, and I'm already in conversation with one of the chief execs of one of the major housing associations. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I can assure you that this Alliance administration will not leave a stone unturned when we're looking at housing for island residents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens, and I think this committee will be very interested in updates as we go along on that, because, well, quite frankly, I think it's the biggest issue on the island at the moment. Not affordable housing is one thing, affordable rents is another thing, but rents themselves, not even just affordable numbers. I mean, if you want to go and rent a property tomorrow, there's probably a queue of 300 down the road. So, and few of them available. So I think that's really important that we get the numbers up and make them as affordable as possible. Thank you.
Continue, Councillor Hastings.
Yes, please do.
Page 45, children in care. Number of children looked after at month end. You read the narrative there. It makes a statement. The rate has stabilised, but remains twice the South East average. And then it says this, well, I found quite astonishing statement. There is well documented evidence that this is a result of several factors, but we don't get any explanation of what those several factors are. Is there any opportunity of getting from the Cabinet member, maybe just a flavour of what those several factors are?
Thank you. Yes, that's a good point. Councillor Andre.
Thank you for this. I am actually going to pass over to Steve on this because he does have the full detail on this, and I think it's more appropriate that he can give a fuller response.
Thank you. Happy to. I think the reference there was that we've referenced it a number of times in the past in these documents, and perhaps we need to continue to do so. The obvious point to make is that when a child comes into care, they can come into care for 18 years. And we saw an increase in the number of children in care from 2012, when there was significant problems with regards to the Isle of Wight Children's Services. Those rates have increased and continue to increase right the way up through to 2020, when they stabilised at a rate that is higher than the Southeast average, but is not higher than, for example, similar authorities. The most similar authority we have is Torbay, which actually has a higher rate of children in care. The more important question, to be honest, is, are the right children in care? and you can look at a range of external evidence around that, and that includes Ofsted reports, and you obviously know about the Ofsted report in 2013, which was very poor, but subsequent Ofsted reports have showed a significant and improving trajectory up to the point in 2018 when the Isle of Wight Council was judged to be good in all aspects, including children in care and including child protection, which should give you good assurance. Now, the other thing that is that will be actually no, I can say it now because the report is unembargoed from today. Is that we've had a further focused visit from Ofsted. That's a routine focused visit. They do this to every authority. It's a touching point during the course of the years to make sure things are on track. That report shows that we continue to be on track. So the assurance that you can take is that we continue to focus on the right things and protect the right children. But the rate, there is a stock and flow issue here, so that the number will, I'm afraid, remain higher for a few years yet.
Thank you, Steve, for that. Can I make a suggestion that in future in this report we actually use a comparator that is meaningful to the Isle of Wight rather than comparing us to maybe Leafy Surrey or somewhere like that? It might be quite a good idea. Okay. Councillor Hastings, I'll continue if you don't mind. Page 65, average number of days lost due to sickness per permanent employee. Again, this would have been Councillor Jarman, but I'll probably direct it at the Chief Executive, actually breaking my rule. But as Mr. Metcalfe will recall, I chaired when it existed, a chair of the Employment Committee for a couple of years, some years ago, where number of sickness days was always one of the key things we looked at. And it was always, the performance was always slightly above target. And it's interesting that effectively since April last year, it's plummeted. And I think we know why that is, don't we? It's because people are working from home and they, in my view, are less likely to report sick. Would you agree with that? And if that is likely to be the case, do you not think there's an argument for continuation of people working from home rather than having to come into an office place?
I need to just check with you, Councillor, what you mean by less likely to report sick. I think people are more likely to work when they are not so well, when they might not normally have come into the office, because certainly in certain instances you wouldn't encourage people to come in if they were feeling unwell, but they might feel well enough to work from home. And certainly the conversations that we've had with our staff and some of the information we've had back through the likes of the Pulse survey have said that they're more likely to do that given the fact that they're working from home. And some have said, for example, that they might get up feeling a little bit rough, so they might start work at 11 o'clock, but work till a little bit later because we've created some agile working environments for them to work within. I think the other thing where we've looked at it is clearly working from home. There's a reduced rate of transmission because people are not in contact with people. People have been very careful about some of the personal hygiene things that we've needed to do for COVID, but of course that has a knock-on effect in terms of other activities as well. So I think there's an awful lot about people working from home, but people having those opportunities to work in a slightly different way. And what we've been trying to do as we are supposedly coming out of the pandemic is trying to get to more of a hybrid situation with the workforce, so that the workforce can come in. If they need to come in, they can work from home if they need to come in, but they work through it with their line managers to find the best approach. But I think our workforce is to be commended actually for those sickness figures, and it's certainly something that we've worked very hard as a 1,500 staff to try to get those figures down, and it is a positive response from them all during what has been a very, very difficult period. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, John. Moving on to the finance pages from page 69 on, Chair. Just do 3 questions there. Page 69. I mean, it's not really a question, it's just interesting that one of over the years of austerity, every budget I've endured in this council chamber, bar 1 or 2, which weren't so bad, has seen a reduction in adult social care expenditure. And if we look at the adult social care budget, there's two very interesting variance figures there. There's one shows that we are not saving the sort of money on care packages that I think we're probably budgeted for in 2021, and yet almost exactly the same figure is we've saved money because we haven't got people to do the reviews. So there is actually an argument here that don't employ the people and you don't have to cut people's adult social care. I think I'm a simple man, but I'd certainly see I haven't argued against adult social care cuts repeatedly over the years. It's interesting that those two figures, you will see them right at the top of the column variance on page 69. They're £7 difference. So it's quite interesting. And I think it's something that the new administration should bear in mind when they go through the issues of setting the budget, and maybe somebody could pass the message on to Councillor Jarman. The floating bridge, interesting, lower down, which was budgeted to cost us the best part of £750,000 this year, is on in that year. Sorry, it cost us over £1 million. Just an observation. My questions relate particularly on page 71. There is a reference on page 71 in the capital programme to a building in my own patch, and that's Brooklime House, Bluebell Meadows. It's the third row down on page 71. This is a building on the Pan Meadows estate that was bought de facto by the council, but de jure paid for by the NHS, and is a provision for, it describes them as LD clients. I don't like that, people with learning disabilities living in the community. And there have been problems there ever since people moved in there that I've been concerned about, that I used to pass on to Ms. Gordian's predecessor, Dr. Tozer, on a regular basis, because I do have concern. But it's interesting that there's money available here to be spent on Brooklime House that I would have thought, why on earth do we need to spend that level, the 181,000 that hasn't been spent, when they've only been there about 2 years? Seems a rather strange capital allocation, given the people only moved in there. We only bought it just over 2 years ago, and Councillor Love's gone now as well. The cabinet members don't like staying, Laura. I was perhaps he could have given me an answer. Maybe Laura Gordian could. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, okay, thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. In relation to the capital funding available for Brooklime House, it is ring-fenced by NHS in terms of what it can be used for. It's being retained as contingency to ensure that any changes or upgrades to the accommodation can be made should people with enhanced or complex needs move into the property. So we're unable to spend it in any other way. It's been agreed with NHS that we'll retain it to support the group of people living in that house should we need to do so in the future.
Well, thank you, Laura. That's good to know, to be honest, because, I do sometimes have concerns, and maybe there'll be more in the future. But it's good that we've got, people who are used to almost institutionalisation living within my community, and they've been welcomed into it. Perhaps unlike people in the homeless shelter in recent weeks, but I couldn't resist mentioning that. And finally, Steve, you'll be pleased to know.
You can take as much time as you like.
Page 76, leisure centres. This is this year, first quarter. Leisure centres on page 76. Well, they're supposed to make a small income for us. The budget this year is £284,000. The forecast outturn is a loss of 1.3 million. I don't know. I would say, how is Councillor Jarman proposing to deal with it? I'm not sure in the cabinet who's responsible for leisure centres. I think it's I don't know who it is.
Yeah, John, do you want to come in on that one?
John, yeah.
If I may come back, Councillor, I think it's a really good spot.
And what this really demonstrates is the loss of income that we've received in the leisure centres because of the COVID pandemic. We thought about this. We knew this was going to happen. I think this is why we created a COVID contingency fund, which was about £14 million when it was finished at the end of the last budget recycle. Government have put in place an income protection scheme, which effectively provides us with 75 pence in the pound for every pound of lost income. They replenish it with 75 pence. That scheme ran through the last financial year, and it ran for the first quarter of this financial year. So it will probably pay about £400,000 into the council's accounts this financial year, unless the government choose to extend it, but they've not given any indication that they will do that. The purpose of the COVID contingency fund was to allow us to bridge this gap between income and expenditure till such point as the leisure centres have recovered and got themselves back on an even foot. So the £14 million was meant to be spent over a 3-year period to get us into, if you like, a recovery position back to the position we were before. Of course, as a proactive council, we'd want to review that position every year and make sure that we were on track to do that, and if not, think about what we may need to do as an alternative. But effectively, that funding is there to breach that gap in income. It's also making a contribution to a shortfall in our income from car parking and our income from bereavement services. So all of those big income budgets are being covered off by that gap at this moment in time. So it is planned for, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should just take it as read, and we won't take it as read.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was aware of a lot of that, but I think it's sometimes I like to highlight things, you know, that in a public forum. I think that's important to happen at corporate scrutiny. Thank you for your forbearance, Steve. It
is a pleasure indeed.
As I will tell you later, I'm not a member of this committee after tonight because I sit here as an alliance person, so I'm enjoying myself just before I finish. But that doesn't mean to say I won't be here at the back, sticking my hand up. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. You'll be always welcome, Jeff. Members, anybody else on the subject? Chris.
On the key pressures for the current financial year, we've got a forecast variance of over 3.3 million relating to COVID, which seems quite high considering we're coming out of it.
Yes, please, John.
If I may come back on that one, I think I relate to my previous answer, Councillor Quirk. Yes, we're coming out of it, but we know that we've got some long-term expenditure that will be related to COVID, where our costs will not settle down to previous years for some time. We know all about the income pressures, as I've just alluded to. So we actually think, as many other local authorities think, that it's going to take us 2 or 3 years to recover to our normal position, which is why we've created the COVID Recovery Fund. You can see in the papers before you tonight, this is assuming a withdrawal of about £3 million from that fund just in this financial year to get us to the end of the year on a balanced position.
Could we have an explanation of that at the next quarterly report to see where it's going and where it's coming from?
Absolutely, Chair. I think the very bottom line above grand total sets out COVID net income loss from COVID contingency 2.9 million. I think that is repeated in each report that we bring forward, but we can keep explaining it.
Thank you, John. Anybody else on the quarter? No. Okay, then we shall move on. I'm going by the cabinet paper agenda here rather than the one on our paper. And the next thing I have listed is deployment of discretionary business support grant. Anybody? Yes.
Hi, Chair.
Anybody got any questions accordingly? Chris, it doesn't look like anybody wants to speak to you.
Chair, I'll just propose that the Scrutiny Committee notes the proposal.
Yeah.
Because you have an outcome. And it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then we shall move right along. Council support for the Isle of Wight for the progressing of the DBID 2. Members got any questions on this? No? Nothing on that?
Chair, again, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
For some reason,
Go on, Jeff.
my phone's not working now, but never mind, quite a loud voice. Thank you. Yeah, it's obviously, if you read the report, the survey undertaken by Visit Isle of Wight is that there will be support again for a second round of the D bid. And I mean, you know, the proof will be in the pudding, won't it, really, when there's a ballot at the end of the day. You know, some people thought they were going to win an election last May and they didn't, you know, so be careful what you wish for. But I mean, I think you should just note this report again. Thank you, Chair.
Chris, you...
There's one with a bit of a back.
There's going to be debate on this issue. I need to declare a pecuniary interest and I'll need to leave the room. So if members have got questions about it, I'm a D-bid payer.
Well, yeah, if you can just vacate for a short period, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Just to encourage.
Any more losses? Thank you.
No, just to encourage Cabinet to support this, because I don't think there's a plan B. So, you know, if we want tourism is to continue as a major employer on the island, we need to support it. It's a cash cow, but even cows have to be fed.
That is true. Yes, John. Well.
Yeah, just very much the same lines. I mean, there is an alternative. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think we should, if possible, give our full political support to this.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else?
Chairman, I think Julie Jones-Evans is wants to speak.
Oh, Julie Jones-Evans, would you like to come in and speak to us?
Oh, hello, Chair. Hear me? I'm actually offline.
Yes.
I'm not going to terribly signal. So I just want to say I'm listening intently. I did give my apologies that I wasn't going to be here. But if any members of Scrutiny would like to write to me in between now and making decisions on Thursday, I'm more than happy to take any queries and respond to them. So I'm listening intently and taking on board what everyone's saying. Apologies I can't be there this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anybody else? Okay. Well, then I tend to agree with Jeff here and Chris and John. Yeah, welcome the support. And as you say, there is no plan B, is there? And the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, as they say. So, yeah, let's just support that. Yes. Thank you. Thanks, John. Thank you for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the referral of the motion to the full council, the Newport City status. Anybody wish to make any comments or questions regarding that? I note your support, Jeff, through the Newport Community Council.
Well, you didn't really have any choice, did you, really, if you're a Newport councillor? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to declare a formal interest. You know, I am the chair of Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council, and I'm also obviously an Isle of Wight councillor within Newport, representing the Pan and Barton part of the town. This is a motion that was brought forward by Councillor Martin Oliver, representing Mountjoy and Shide, who used to have the honour of being one of my residents when I covered that part of Shide, so I hope he's doing as good a job as I did. It was a big surprise, to be honest, when I noticed it on the agenda for the July full council, because I got advance notice of that. I asked Martin if he was happy for me to consult with the community council ahead of the full the Isle of Wight council at the end of July. He was happy to do that. He provided lots of background information, and it was approved unanimously by the community council. Obviously, it went to full council, but because there are financial implications, it's had to be deferred to the next meeting, so as the cabinet can consider it. You've got a report there. It's very clear. I think it's a very straightforward issue. Martin, you know, in his explanation to when he came along the community council, just believes that, you know, the Isle of Wight should be treated like all other counties. And where, you know, I know that other people will say, well, why isn't Brighton going to be the city, or why isn't Bender or Ryde or whatever? Newport was a county town. You know, it has been, and is historically, it's a very old town. A borough that dates back, a borough when it was a borough, that dates back to the 14th century, and it was a rotten borough in Parliament with 2 MPs for many years as well. So, I mean, it has a long historical status, and I think, you know, in terms of the regeneration of the county town, a successful application would be great. I wouldn't say I'm massively confident about it, but you know, I think it would be great. We were asked on the community council if we had the resources to do the bid ourselves with the county. We haven't. We just haven't got the, you know, we haven't got the resources within our staff. Because unlike some town councils, we don't employ nearly 30 people. We only employ 8 people, and there's a limit to what we can actually do, and the expertise of people who, you know, making these sort of bids. Wendy Pereira's written a report. It's in Laura's name, the leader's name. You know, they're prepared to lead on it with our support and other organisations if possible. So, I mean, I just, you know, I mean, I'm not proposing anything. At the end of the day, what will be at full council next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, Councillor Quigley.
I'm not against the motion. I think reading the mood music of the island is we're in danger of looking like we're trying to push water uphill with a fork when we decide on things like this. Is that, you know, realistically it probably won't take up much of our time, but when you've got an island that is struggling to find housing, as Jeff said earlier, and there's so many problems, I think we're in danger of doing ourselves a lot of harm with things like this. And I don't doubt in the end it'll be a good thing, and I will be in favour of it. But I just think we've got so much pressing work to do, as we all admit, that I just worry that these things sometimes are counterproductive.
Thank you for that. Councillor Midland and then Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, again, I'm like Councillor Quigley, I'm in two minds about this, because I want to support the community council in their opinion, but another part of me, you know, I was actually in the city of Newport this summer, and it was rather incongruous to be in a real city with a very large railway station, hundreds of thousands of people, etc. And I'm just wondering, fearing that we could become a bit of a laughing stock over this one, because, you know, Newport does not look like a city in my common sense head. And just want to come back to one other thing. What I'd really like to see Newport do is revert to its or restore its town status, which was originally established by Richard de Redvers in 1180-ish. We don't have the original charter, but we've got it. But that's what most people think Newport Town Council began. It had a very illustrious history, including overthrowing the Royalist government in 1642, before the Civil War. And it went on up until 1974, and then we got rid of it. And I think that's a bit of, I would like to see Newport Town Council, the corporation, the pride in the corporation restored personally, before embarking on this rather strange idea. I just find it very, very odd, but I fear it could have bad consequences.
Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I'd like to echo much of what Councillor Quigley and Councillor Medland have said, because I think right now the council should be prioritising other things. You know, we've got a massive crisis in adult social care and social care in general, and I don't think this should be a focus of staffing time. And, you know, much of what the public opinion of this is that you see and hear when you're talking to people is that actually this isn't a priority of the people. And, you know, we see cities, and Newport isn't a city. Actually, we should be prioritising what Newport is. It is the county town, and, you know, let's regenerate the high street rather than focus on trying to get a city status, which, if it was successful, I'm sure it could bring some, you know, good things, but it doesn't have any financial, you know, backing behind it. If you have a city status, there's no income from that. Actually, it's council expenditure going out for staffing. So I don't think it should be a priority of the council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, Councillor.
Some of the Homes England funding is the city regeneration funds. To get the city regeneration funds, you need to be a city. If you want to renew and improve Newport, I will bear that in mind. I personally, I'm from Shanklin, but I would support actually Newport being a city. I think it gives more status to the island, and I think it gives us a bit more clout when we're applying for some of the grant funding that we might find very useful in the future. And currently, a lot of the grant funding is, you have to apply for it. It's not shared out evenly. You have to make your case. And I personally think this is a good case to make, and I would support it, and I would encourage Cabinet to support it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I would add to that, I think Homes England, I think if they were, they're more likely to invest in or go for something that's big rather than tinkering around here and there, fiddly little bits of development. And, if you want some of our regeneration aspirations, the biggest problem you've got is finding an investor or investors. So if you're a city status rather than a insignificant town, you're more likely to get that investment, I would suggest.
Yeah, just to come back on a couple of things, I'm not going to go to the wall here, to be frank, and it's a decision for Isle of Wight Full Council next Wednesday. At the end of the day, the Cabinet will make a recommendation. They're recommending at the moment, that it's supported. I would just say that this is not my proposal. Frankly, it's not the administration's proposal. It was Councillor Oliver's proposal, who isn't a member of the administration, and he's done the research on it and was persuasive enough for Newport community councillors, many of whom are Isle of Wight councillors as well. In terms of a laughing stock, well, I would say that if you're in Wales, not only go to Newport, go to St David's, which is much smaller than Newport. Doesn't even have a minster church of the size of Newport, and certainly doesn't have a castle perched on the hill that we have within the boundaries of Newport and Carisbrooke parish, although we call ourselves a community council. And finally, the issue of our status is a decision for the community council. We made that very clear decision in 2008 when we had emparishment effectively enforced on us, though we eventually embraced it. We made the very clear decision that we wouldn't be a town council, because unlike Ryde, which was created at the same time, Ryde is an entirely urban area. 90% of the geography of Newport and Carisbrooke is rural. That is why we stayed as a parish. We've changed the name a couple of years ago to a community council because we felt that reflected better what we are. Well, I can't see any member of our council wanting a town council in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And yet I would just add that nobody ever went to the Olympics thinking they were going to lose or thinking they would end up as a laughing stock. They just go for it. They don't all get gold medals, but we all think they're very good for doing it, don't we? Councillor Payne.
I just wanted to add one final thing, is that as well as an island, we talked about Visit Isle of Wight just a moment ago, we have a lot of tourists that come here and they often come away from a city, and whilst we know Newport isn't a massive city like some of the other places, if it has that status, it may almost give off a persona that actually it's something that it isn't. Actually, people come here to come away from the large urban cities a lot of the time, so I think it's important to bear that into consideration as well.
Thank you. And as Jeff says, this will all be debated in full council, and something will be a conclusion. Anybody else got any comments on this or questions? No. Yes, go on.
I support it, but without any particular strength.
Absolutely, well said, and backed by much history and regal involvement. There is any particular outcome, is there, apart from...
Chair, I would say it's got a full council.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's irrespective of the Cabinet's decision, it's going to be debated there by the 39 elected members of the Isle of Wight Council, and then I think it should be left to them.
I agree, yeah, to be concluded later. Is the outcome. Next matter is, the climate and environment strategy. Members. John, yes, go on. Councillor.
Well, I just want to give my full support to it, really. I think there's some excellent work being done here, and congratulations to you as chairman of the committee which brought this to fruition. And I think that some of the staff have done a fantastic job as well. I'm really very impressed with the document as it stands and fully support it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say any more than that. I haven't read it in massive detail, but in my quick skim through at the weekend, it looked an absolutely fantastic document, and I'm more than happy to support it.
Chris?
I too support it. It was hard to see much difference from the document that was there that you created, but I'm very supportive of the whole principle of it, and I would encourage that to be accepted.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, well, it's a moving document. It was always going to be, wasn't it? It was, right from going from the climate emergency through to task and finish group. Officers have worked exceedingly hard on this, I would say. The amount of work that's gone into it, and the production is fantastic. And Councillor Bacon will continue this on, I'm sure. As I say, in this moving document, it will just grow and grow. Is there anything you wanted to add, Councillor Bacon?
It's the right one.
Yes, why don't the microphones work?
If you press the right button.
Thank you for those comments. I think I'd just pick up on those last points you made, Chair, that this is, if I can use the word, an organic document. The strategy is there. It gives the dates. There's a pragmatic element to that, in that the council only controls directly about 1% of the carbon on the island, so the 2030 target remains there, and then we have staggered targets: 2035 for the schools, and then 2040 for the remainder of the island, recognising that we cannot rely on direct power, and it's down to influence essentially to achieve that cross-island target. And I think the other point is, again, as I say, picking up on what you said, the strategy is only so much. What is really important here is there's a detailed action plan, and that is the true organic element. That will be subject to continual review. There'll be an initial review, as the papers say in 9 months, and I've asked that there be ongoing review every 6 months thereafter, so that it can be adapted, amended, added to, taken away from, whatever works, bearing in mind changing circumstances, grants, scientific knowledge, and so on. So I very much hope it will be supported, not just in Cabinet on Thursday, but by everyone, staff, councillors within the council and across the island.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's, I think I'm famed for saying, a strategy without an action plan is a piece of paper. So very pleased to see it, and a very well written action plan. And of course, the important factor is, as you say, we can influence some things, we can guide things, but we can do things ourselves, and where we lead, others will follow. I think that's the important. So we need to be there first and do it, and others can then follow what we do. Thank you. And members, any comments, questions further? Nothing more on that. Okie dokie. I think we've kind of come to the end there, haven't we, of that? Yes. Right. So back on the other agenda. Moving into our work plan and forward plan. We got the new forward plan. You've all got copies of that, which is quite an extensive forward plan. Any comments or questions or thoughts on that? Councillor Quigley.
Only that there's a lot on it. That's a lot to achieve without a lot of work in the background, which we're all prepared to do. But does this mean there's things that aren't being dealt with at other committees, so they're falling here by accident, or is this really the amount of things we need to look at?
This is the council's and cabinet's forward plan. It's not your scrutiny work plan.
Take that back then. That's fine.
I see where you were going with that. Yeah, yeah. It would be rather a lot for our committee. Yeah, lots of task and finish groups. Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, and of course, there's quite a lot for the cabinet to do, who seem to have taken to heart my criticism of them back in June that they didn't have anything on a forward plan, because I've never seen a longer forward plan in my history. But I don't really think you need on a forward plan things that are not going to be considered until next March. But there we go. I think you have to give 4 months notice, not the best part of a year, or 6 months or whatever that is till then. What is useful, Chair, for it, of course, and I won't be around to give you to Steve in this direction, is for members of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee and the other 2 scrutiny panels to identify significant decisions that are coming up in the future, and perhaps do some work in advance in terms of, rather than just getting this, devoting a day like Sunday it was for me in the garden, reading this. God, it's so boring, isn't it, really? What I mean? But that's what a proper scrutineer has to do. So it's about sometimes just looking at the advanced stuff. I look through here and there's some really major stuff, but the most important thing that I am waiting with bated breath, because it's very late in this cycle, is the corporate plan, which of course I had some involvement in at the start, so I want to see how much changed since I left the Alliance group, but certainly in terms of planning issues and such like, but there we go. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, your boredom in reading through the papers didn't show in the committee tonight. Actually, very interesting and useful questions. Thank you.
That's got to be done.
Absolutely. And interesting what comes out in planning matters. That will be very interesting. Members, any other comments, questions, thoughts? No, nothing further there. So with our work plan,
Chair, on your corporate scrutiny work plan, which is the next thing, which is your work, but it's like your equivalent of a forward plan. Just to highlight, as I said earlier, I won't be on the committee after tonight, well, from next Wednesday when the full council reapportions committee places. But on page 35 and 38, much to my surprise, I seem to have become the lead member for the review of the investment strategy you've agreed to do, and also the social value in the council's procurement and commercialisation processes. I wasn't aware of that, but you're going to need a new lead member for both of them. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. And, you probably would have made a very good lead member on those subjects, but we will have to manage, won't we? Yeah. Thank you for that. Members, any thoughts and comments on their work plan? Or are you happy with it as it stands, apart from the bits that Jeff has just discussed?
In terms of Jeff's topic request on social value in the council's procurement and commercialisation process, Laura did ask me to run a project on that, which I've set up, so that will be covered.
Fabulous. Okay, yeah, that's good. Anybody else? Anything else? I think it's just a matter of looking. I'm happy with this. Anything else to come forward? Yes.
It might be a good idea that we actually think about deciding which cabinet member is going to give us a update on to budget in relation to budget performance and risks in the service areas. This is obviously on every meeting, but as October isn't that far away, perhaps we can give some thought to that. Who would be doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. Who's it's the next one, isn't it? It's October. That's in October.
Pardon, it says it's Laura here.
Yeah.
I do beg your pardon.
So Laura's the first one, yes. We look forward to that, as I'm sure you will as well. Yeah, it's the following one that we haven't got anybody for. Then wasn't it? That's right. Right forward.
Yeah, we've got it until February to be confirmed.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Good enough.
Now he's down for, we're down for November.
You're in November, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, and the rest we will fill in as we go. Okie dokie. So I think that's I'll find my agenda. I think we're down to members' questions, is it? Yeah, members' questions. Anybody, any members' questions anywhere?
Quigley.
All right, I'm going to go to Councillor Quigley first and then Councillor Stevens.
And this may be from naivety on my part, and it is a question really for probably a longer term. But in terms of council income, which we do need to generate significant amounts of income by the looks of things over the next few years, have we not reached the point where there's some merit in some sort of infrastructure fee from all car journeys or vehicle journeys that start in Southampton or Portsmouth to the island, and a similar thing to add on to a ticket price for festivals, events and new events, because there's considerable income to be made there, and I cannot see why anybody would disagree with that.
Interesting one. Are you going to, Councillor Bacon, are you going to come on? Okay.
I'm having that discussion with the relevant director already, and would very much welcome your input if you wish to join in that discussion.
Yes, we got in October. We got the commercialisation strategy listed, so we can pick it up on that and get an update. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the our forward plan, if you like, or the forward plan, and the changes and the detail put alongside each entry, do you feel that that is an improvement? And if there is any other way that you and your committee wish to see the forward plan transcribed and improved, please let us know. But if I'm just asking, are you happy with what you've got? Do you want more?
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Well, members, the question has been asked. Does any Councillor Down?
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Stevens, on that long list, there is detail underneath that's never been there before. I don't know if you can put any more detail into it, but it looks like a bit of an improvement to me. But there we go. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, any detail is always helpful, obviously. Yeah. Okay, fabulous. We will feed something back when we have our informal discussion. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? No. Okay. Well, then that brings us to the end of our agenda, end of our meeting. Thank you very much. It was 7 o'clock. Look at that, 2 hours on the spot. Thank you, everybody. Wish you well. Goodbye.